Welcome back to Does My Bank Still Love Me? I'm Norm Newkirk. We're speaking today with Michelle Sanayebakhsherad from Sound Method Modifications. And we're talking with Michelle about how the distressed homeowner and their family can best deal with the trauma of getting through the possibility of losing your home, of your family being split up. There's a lot of psychological ramification here.
Definitely.
And two things you mentioned in the segment just prior to this was that one, you said forearmed or be prepared, and the second one was, and I can't remember it now.
Knowing how to move through the bank system.
Okay, so let's start with the first one, because I think that's important when you're starting the process of, say, loan modification, or heaven forfend, you have to go to a foreclosure, short sale or foreclosure.
Right.
What is the most important thing that you would suggest the people handling, the husband or the wife handling, or both, handling the situation? What's the most important thing from the beginning?
From the beginning, the most important thing, if you are behind in your mortgage, oftentimes that means that you cannot pay the full amount, but there still is some amount that you would normally allow in your budget for your mortgage payments. That money should not be used as extra money or to go to other bills if it's not absolutely necessary. It's very important that people save that money as much as they can, even if they put it under their mattress, if they don't want to show it in their bank accounts. Because sometimes if you show excessive assets, then the lenders will say you don't qualify, even if it's only to the amount that would be a partial reinstatement. But it's important to have those funds stored as well as you can, because a modification and a short sale is not a guarantee. So if keeping your home is your main priority, which in some cases it's not, for some people, they are not emotionally attached to the property, or they are morally opposed to paying that amount, or they've just resigned to the fact that they cannot afford that amount if help is not available. But for some people who have fallen delinquent on their mortgage, or maybe in the situation that you were laid off and you have since gotten a new job and you can resume making payments even at the previous amount, although it's not favorable, the most important thing is to have some funds available, if not for reinstating your mortgage, for moving costs, for higher deposits on rent, because credit is not the most important thing right now. It's really not. We're seeing that all the time where landlords and even lenders your credit score is not the most important thing as it was a couple years ago. Money speaks.
One thing I wanted to just kind of back up just a slight bit, and we talked about it just before we started taping, and that was keeping notes on everyone with whom you speak and every single procedure you go through. And you said that's extremely important, and you started talking about that.
Yeah, so and that's going through how to navigate into the bank systems. You really have to keep meticulous notes. Everyone who you speak with, say, can I please have a client ID, or agent ID, representative ID, or a reference number for this call. You have to make sure that at the point where you're talking to your bank, maybe you're talking to the negotiator, maybe you're talking to a supervisor, and you say this happened, and they say no, it didn't, you're able to say, well, I spoke with John ID 55555 on May 2nd at 9:05 a.m., right?
And it's that specific.
It doesn't have the time, but the day is definitely important. Who you spoke with is important. Mm-hmm. What department they were in is very relevant. Whether they were a supervisor, what kind of level of a worker they were. All these things. If they didn't keep accurate notes, sometimes you're still able to go back, and if you have their employee ID number, the person you're speaking with can oftentimes reach them and say, hey, you had this call, even if it was just as recent as a week ago. Say, you had this call, you escalated it, we don't see any notes about it, did you receive a response towards that escalation? I've had that come in handy many times, where it's very important to keep those notes and make sure that you're able to reference who you spoke with and what they told you.
Keeping notes.
Keeping notes, very important.
Another thing you just mentioned before we got into that, excuse me, is You said the possibility that you may not be wedded to this house emotionally, and,
Yes.
and there's some people who are for various reasons. Either
Right.
it was a parental home, or it was given, or there are certain circumstances.
Yes.
But that to me sounds like something you also have to prepare in your mind. Are you willing to let go of the property? And if you do let go of the property, what are you willing to do in order to secure housing for yourself and your family?
Right, right. And so the first thing that people need to decide, well, I think actually the first thing that people decide is how important is your credit. That seems to be the first psychological gap that people need to cross. Is it worth going? Because I will see people borrowing money from every member of their family, every friend they have for a year to keep up with their mortgage payments while trying to get assistance from the banks. And the irony of this situation, I was actually just talking to a supervisor at Bank of America about this today. The irony of that is that you cannot prove to a bank that you cannot afford to pay them if you are paying them. That being said, it would be completely unethical for us ever to advise anyone not to make your mortgage payments. It's just the sad reality of it, and the catch-22 that homeowners find themselves in is that they're doing everything to try and do what they've been conditioned in our society to do, and that is make your debt obligations, make your word be everything it was. And when you sign anything, when you sign a contract, be it loan documents or otherwise, saying that you agree to do this, people want to do it. And so they're faced with not only breaking their word by defaulting on their loan, but also impacting their credit, which from the time that someone is 18 and for the rest of their lives, they feel like this is something that they need to keep intact.
Let's address that right now, because that's something that I had a question I had before. How important is it to keep your credit where you think it should be? That's a subjective situation.
It is a subjective situation, definitely. And for me personally, what I think when I see these situations going on is that your credit score is virtually an imaginary number. Not only that, but it's a temporary number because it fluctuates almost daily if you're keeping an accurate watch on your credit score. But ultimately, the highest impact that you're going to see is 7 years, 10 years if you file bankruptcy. And so it's not permanent, and people, they have a lot of difficulty, I think, acknowledging that. Okay. One thing that I usually use as an example for people when they're in this situation, especially if they have children, if you have a child who is 7 years old, for most parents, that time went by very, very quickly. Yeah. And so when I'm having these conversations with people where they're feeling, you'd be surprised at how people's self-worth is impacted when they end up being in a position where they can't make these obligations and they're so worried about their credit. And they say they feel like it's going to be forever before they see the other side of this situation. And so to give them a reference point of how fast time really passes, I think I've noticed it helps people a lot when they look at it from a different perspective, where 7 years when you're thinking about your credit score changing seems like a long time, but when you put it from a different perspective of 7 years for your child to lose their first tooth or something like that, it seems to happen overnight.
So it is a matter of subjectivity. It's not
really
objective,
is.
it's subjective.
And then when you look at how it really affects you, like if you do a short sale with some other methods of improving your credit, staying current on other obligations, you're looking at about 2 years before you're able to buy a house. Right. And that's a very small amount of time. And for most people that are in the process of short sale, they're not looking to buy a house in 2 years. Right. Foreclosure, it's a little bit different, but you can buy another house within that 7-year time frame. Your interest rates might not be the best, but with credit repair and other staying current on other obligations, it doesn't impact you as much as you think it will. And for someone who is middle-aged and has had an extensive credit history, a foreclosure is not the end-all by any means. So I think it's important for people to gain sight of that. Yes, your credit score will drop significantly, when you fall delinquent. Once you get the notice of sale, it will definitely impact you greatly, but it's not the end all.
But not to concentrate on that. There are other things to concentrate on. We've been speaking with Michelle Sanayebakhsherad from Sound Method Modifications, giving us a lot of information and a lot of help to distressed homeowners, how to psychologically get through this very troubled time. We will return. You've been listening to Does My Bank Still Love Me? I'm Norm Newkirk.
Hard times at the wrong time, wrong place at the right time. Sometimes it's your very best time, but that can also be your last time.